Hey there, Sonia.
Hey, Caelan.
How's it going?
It's going.
Good. It's a lot better than it's stopping.
Yes. Oh, you just froze on me.
Yeah, I sure did. I'm in a cafe, and so my internet is a little suspect. Hopefully,
Ah,
it'll be catching up now.
okay.
Great. We'll just give a few more minutes for everybody to come on.
Yes. You know what? This has been a great idea. I love that you have initiated this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I have a lot of fun hosting these conversations. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us.
Oh,
Hey, Matt.
you've changed your hair, Sonia.
Yeah, I just wore it down instead of on top of my head. Thank you for noticing.
That's okay. Camera on. You look somewhere exotic today, Caelan. Whereabouts are you hanging out?
I am in the Southern Cross Cafe in downtown Wellington.
Lovely.
Yeah, I was hoping for somewhere a little quieter, but I'm in between appointments right now, so this is kind of what I've got.
Yeah.
Fun fact, today the Thought Leaders Business School local community in Wellington is meeting down the road. And so in a couple of hours, I'm going to be going and meeting other people who are enrolled in business school, and we're going to be geeking out on pink sheets and green sheets and all that fun stuff. So
Cool.
yeah, so that'll be fun.
Mhm.
It's actually the big reason I'm downtown today is so that I could go and attend that meeting, and happened to stack a few more before this. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to be out during the book club. So, so I apologize if my video skips or if I freeze. So just like right now, it looks like everybody's frozen. Darn.
Mhm.
Well, you know what I will do, just so that I can more authentically participate, is I'm just going to go ahead and turn off my video. And so that'll hopefully help with my upload speed. And hopefully the noise in the background isn't too much. I guess I'll mute occasionally when I need to as well.
Yeah.
I guess this is why. Lynn recommends the app Coffitivity. I don't know if you've come across it.
No, I haven't. Coffitivity?
Yeah, Coffitivity. You can go to the website coffitivity.com, and you can have all these different sort of ambient background noises that you can use while you're working. And one of them is a cafe.
Oh, that's great.
So you can set the volume of how much hubbub you want, and then put some music over the top, make it more authentic. And yeah, it's quite cool actually.
How interesting.
Nice. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'll have to try that next time I'm at home and I want to have a virtual hangout in a cafe. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Just make sure the coffee's good.
Yeah, it's gotta be good. Yeah, I have my own home espresso machine because I have to have good coffee while I'm working.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. Today we're talking about section 4, your market, and chapter 10 is diversifying delivery modes. Chapter 11 is sequencing your channels, and chapter 12 is pursuit of mastery. And this whole section is about these 6 different delivery modes that thought leaders move through. And chapter 10 talks about what each one is, and chapter 11 talks about how to use them together in each of them. And so the question I'd like to start with today is, do any of these 6 modes not depend on results?
What do you mean by that?
Well, the training mode is dependent on the outcome of the training day. You're going to learn this thing, and then at the end of it, you'll have this knowledge. Facilitation says that you're going to be together in a group, and then at the end of it, you will have this outcome. Is there an outcome for each of the 6 delivery modes, or do any of them not rely on results?
I think all of them relies on results. I think for the recipient as well as the deliverer, if you're not going into your training with some sort of intention of what you want as the trainer, or, I mean, I think for any of these modes, I think results are for both parties, both sides.
Yeah, what about authorship?
Well, I think it depends on what you want as a result. Yes, the money isn't big in authorship, depending on, well, if you're a bestseller, perhaps. But to get your message to more people, it's a passive way, but you're still getting results. There's still an outcome of spreading a message that could potentially, if the outcome of a book as well is to use it as a vehicle for getting speaking engagements. So I think every single mode could have an outcome. Depends on what you intentionally want that outcome to be.
I think what's interesting is if you look at the 3 different sort of groupings that they use of, tell, show, and ask. I think, the tell and show, hey, you tend to, your point, Sonia, you tend to come to it with more of a specific outcome that you're seeking, and not just for yourself, but for the client. Whereas the ask modes, I think that can be a little more, guided by what the client needs. So I guess, your outcome would be that the client gets a good outcome, but you don't need to be as wedded to the specifics because you're asking them more so than telling or showing. So I still think there's an outcome, but I think your way of getting there is a little bit different.
Well, and I think that brings up another interesting point. Who drives the outcome? For instance, in the coaching relationship, it's the coachee, the client, who drives the outcome.
Yeah.
I think, with speaking, I might have a role in driving the outcome, but what the participants take away, yes, to your point, yes, telling, I mainly, I take the onus on the outcome that I want the audience to achieve or to get. So I like that way of framing that.
I think also with the authorship one that you raised, Caelan, I guess the way I think about, one of the things that thought leaders has helped me appreciate is that a book, and I don't know if I read this somewhere within the curriculum or whether it's just something that I've concocted myself, but your book is essentially a 300-page business card. It's not really an end in itself for most people. 99% of people probably won't sell enough copy of their books to sit on a beach somewhere. Certainly not until you're well into your practice and operating at black belt level. Whereas as a vehicle, to use your term, Sonia, for winning business and winning engagement, winning authority, it has an outcome. So there's kind of 2 levels of outcome for me with the book. And it's probably similar with speakership. It's a positioning exercise, and there's a specific takeaway. So you've got kind of 2 levels. There's the meta level, if you like, of positioning yourself as an authority in the space. And then there's the specific outcomes of that particular book or particular speech that you're delivering, or keynote that you're delivering, that will determine what the specific takeaway is.
Well, this is really interesting because we've of outcomes here. There's the outcome to the audience of what their takeaways are from interacting with your work. There's the outcome to you as the professional in terms of how much revenue you earn. And then there's the outcome of how it affects your practice as a whole. Authoring a book, it might not get you a significant amount of revenue, but it could make it a lot easier to sell your coaching programs and your keynotes. So the outcomes on our individual side, the selfish outcomes, if you will, seem to be very, very malleable, depending on what you want to use it for. But I'm really interested in this outcome of the audience member, what sorts of transformation they go through. I love this point you brought up, Matt, and the tell mode. Because if we're telling somebody this is the outcome you can expect, then we're going to guide them how to get there. But with coaching, the conversation guides it. And so we don't know what the outcome is going to be. We know there will be a result, and we can maybe frame it generally, but we can't necessarily predict what's going to happen in that conversation until we go into it. So does that change how we promote results?
I definitely think so. I mean, having had some experience with coaching myself, it's sometimes possible for there to be no outcome in the coaching session itself, and for the aha moment to come later when people have had time to reflect. So as a coach, you don't want to be too attached to, oh, I have to have, an outcome in this session for the client, because sometimes there's a deeper level of reflection that needs to happen, or they need to take some action that really cements, the insight for them. And so that's something that, again, you've got to just be very mindful of as a coach, is that you're not, the journey is the clients. And this comes back to that sort of reverence point that's made in the book from a selling perspective, is there's a reverence that there's, even in a coaching, you're selling something, you're selling the idea of them trying something, or maybe taking an experiment as a way to move forward in the things they're wanting to move forward in. But you're not necessarily in control of that, and I think, Sonia, your point about who's driving the outcome is a good one.
Mm-hmm. I believe that coaching is client-led. And I make it clear up front that the transformation does not occur in the coaching session. The most productive part of the whole coaching process is what happens in between sessions.
Correct.
What they take from the coaching session and execute and learn.
Yeah.
So I think it's a different, I don't come with any expectations of what the client can produce, or they're responsible for the outcomes that they want to achieve. I'm just there, not just there, I am there to guide the process. I'm not the sage on the stage, just the guide on the side.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's really great. So if we can't predict the results, how can we what kind of outcomes can we promise?
Mm-hmm. I turn that back to the client. What is it that they're looking to achieve?
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you can, this is something I found in having discovery calls, that the first third of the discovery call is just asking questions to uncover the problems that this particular client is facing. And then when I introduce my solution, I position the solution as the answer to those problems, so that it's customized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the specifics are absolutely driven by the client, but the ICF did the International Coach Federation, or Coaching Federation now they're called, ran a survey a couple of years ago on what clients were seeking, and they really distilled it down to a handful of things like growth and support, accountability, encouragement, those kind of things, which are not in and of themselves outcomes, but that's kind of the overarching message is, I want to be able to be held accountable for whatever it is that I'm trying to develop, or I want to get the encouragement, or I want the challenge. So there's things like that we can offer as outcomes, but it's hard sometimes for people to conceptualize those because they're a bit nebulous until you sort of make them concrete in terms of their specific need.
Right. And I find that too, in fact, I think Magda Mook, who is the current president, has stated that there's all different types of coaching. I'm more of a consultant in the work that I do with communications. I mean, there are times when I have to play that consultant role and tell my client, all right, this is how you need to do this, versus because they don't know, they don't have the knowledge base from which to draw the answer that they're looking for. And that's why I'm hired. So it's sort of I think my coaching style is a hybrid, but yet the outcome is still, they own the outcome. They're the one that's driving it. I might be more directive in a sense on helping them get to whatever outcome they have decided that they want. So I think coaching is a little more, it's more broad than I think some of the other modes of delivery.
Yeah, I think you're right. In the book, under Speaking Skill 5, they say to be an awesome rock star presenter, you have to change the human condition for those in the room. And I think that's something that we see with speaking, is that if you're going to be an effective speaker, then there needs to be a transformation in the audience. And what that transformation is, that's something that is up to the speaker. You can say, I'll get get your audience really inspired or motivated or productive or emotional or whatever change you want to make. But that change, that transition from before to after, that seems to be an essential component of high quality speaking. And I'd like to say that transformation is required of all the modes. But I'm real suspect of authorship. And it's because authorship, it has this selfish outcome for us as thought leaders. We write a book, we publish a book, we have authority, we use it to get keynotes. But does the authorship necessarily affect the change in the audience? And I'm not sure it does. I've seen a lot of speakers in books who can sell plenty in a keynote, but the book doesn't cause transformation. And so that's why I opened with this question today. Do we need to have an outcome for all 6 of these delivery modes? And I have my doubts.
I actually respectfully disagree. I think that the best example of that refutation is the Green Book that we're talking about. For me, that was a real shift in thinking, and I would say the same thing with most of the books that I've been listening to lately on Blinkist. Is they really have helped to reframe some things, and I think that's the key takeaway. Is if you can help people to reframe their thinking on a particular topic in a way that's useful, I think that's the outcome that your book should drive. And that's, at the end of the day, if people are, if people are not impacted by your book, or at least the premise of your book, then they're probably not going to book you as a speaker anyway. So there's got to be some kind of human connection to a problem that they have or an area of growth that they want to experience and the content of your book. And I think if you miss the mark on that, you're probably going to struggle anyway to get the outcome you're seeking.
And Matt, to your point, I would agree. I think I've read or have tried to read books that speakers have produced. Some of them, they're not worth the read. They were fabulous as speakers, but the content in the book, meh. So if you're going to take the time to use authorship as your mode of delivery, then it better darn well be something of substance that is transformational. I've seen too many, or have tried to get through too many books that were, there was nothing there. So I think more depth needs to, if you're going to use that route, you need to use it in the highest capacity that you, I mean, maybe you're just not meant to be an author. Maybe you've been told that you need a book to get book engagement. Yeah, yeah. And I'm not necessarily sure that everyone should be writing a book.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of my reflections on books, and one of the reasons I use a service like Blinkist, is because no one wants to pay $30, $40 for, 3 sheets of A4 paper. So often the books, the core idea of the book is expounded to the point where it's 60,000 words, but really it's, a 5-minute, 10-minute summary that you really need with a few examples. And that's where I think the power of pink sheets comes in, is that you really are forced to deepen your ideas, think more broadly in terms of how you engage with people on that idea, and also then go deeper on those models. As each pink sheet sort of comes out of it, you multiply them out. You're kind of forced to deepen your ideas rather than coming up with what might be a punchy tagline, but actually doesn't have a lot of substance behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you that having a good book is preferable, and that pink sheets are definitely a way to achieve that. Like you, Sonia, I've read books of some speakers and thought, man, this was just a waste. I loved the keynote and I can't stand this book. And often it's because they skipped a couple of sections of the IP snapshot. There might be lots of stories, but no case studies. Or but no months. And so I think that a pink sheet can definitely improve the quality of authorship. But based on what I've seen, I don't know that the outcome of transforming the state of the audience, it seems to me that authorship has this subversive, what's the word I'm looking for? It's more like it's a subversive purpose for some thought leaders. I'll just publish something so I can say I'm an author and I can sell more keynotes. And I agree with you, it's a missed opportunity. If they wrote a good book, they could have more impact. But if what they want is more keynotes, I don't know, it seems like that authorship is this strange inclusion in the modes, because everything else I can definitely see there's a to it, transforms the audience. But so many speakers, particularly, publish books in order to sell speaking gigs, but not to use the medium of book writing to transform their audience. And so that's why I struggle with authorship, is it's often used not to tend to the audience, but instead to support one of the other delivery modes.
Authorship is not easy. It's a long process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as a writer, that also clarifies thinking. So if you're not authoring something, whether it's your own thoughts on a daily basis, then you're not really practicing authorship. I don't know how your thoughts can go. I know for me, I have a daily practice of writing 750 words a day. And I can tell you that the first 750 words is actually junk.
Right. Totally true.
Yeah, it takes 750 words to actually get to the good stuff. I have to get all that other garbage out of my head before I really get into the heart of what I'm really trying to say. And that goes back to or to Julie Cameron's Artist Way. And there's a site that I use called 750 Words. God forbid if that ever went public, that would be the end of me. It's confidential and private, but it's a nice platform for just getting the junk out of my head to start before I get into what I really am trying to articulate that day.
Yeah.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and that's a good habit to just get that 750. Well, this is a good segue into my next question on chapter 11. When they talk about sequencing your delivery modes. And they have this really interesting strategy called right angle planning, where you choose 3 delivery modes in a right angle. So if you knew that authorship was going to be one of your delivery modes, then you would also want to do speaker, which goes along well with it, and mentor, which goes along well with being an author. And they say that if you want to, if you find yourself starting in something like a coaching relationship, making the jump to speaker is difficult. And so my question is, what happens if you set your practice up that way? If you don't follow this advice and you select delivery modes, what's the risk there?
So I actually have a question around this, because as I was going through this section again, you know,
Did that question come across? Were you able to hear me? Oh, we've got a lag. Sorry about that.
yeah. So I had a question around this. I mean, is the thought around this right angle planning is to eventually do all 6?
Well, I think the thought is to work first with modes that are complementary to each other. And if you want to reach for a different mode that's far enough away that you can stack from this right angle to that right angle to eventually get there.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a section where it talks about you know, the cross-selling opportunities between them, and it particularly calls out again the tell, show, and ask modes. And really, this is what it centers around: is, you know, what are the assets that I need to have in order to make those things work, and they're quite different. So in the tell mode, you know, you need a list and you need a platform. In the show mode, you know, you need deep knowledge and contacts, and in the ask mode, you need relationship skills and the ability to tune into what people are thinking at the time. So the skill sets that you need in each mode, and therefore, you know, each sort of mode grouping are different. And so it's not that you couldn't do all 6, it's just that it's a more natural progression, I think, to do the others, because they require the same kind of assets, and so you can pivot a little more easily to some of those things than if you had to jump modes. So for example, if you were quite good at speakership and then you wanted to move into you know, into the ask modes, that's a pretty big shift, you know, to go from, you know, platforms and lists to being really down to the individual, and being aware of what's happening in the moment. I think it's quite a different, not that it can't be acquired, but it's quite a different skill set.
Yeah,
I think that they, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just because my skill sets are jumpy. That's where I think I struggled with it, is that I go from coach to speaker to trainer. So for me, it wasn't really coherent, and I resisted. I'm resisting what I've just read.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that you've got one of each suit, right? So you've got one tell, one show, and one ask. So maybe that's something else that we can reflect on, is, you know, is that something to aspire to be able to be fluid and flexible between those things?
Mm-hmm.
I think having variety in options of what you sell is, you know, is helpful. It's one of the reasons that this practice model works, and so that you can sell in multiple directions. I think the reason why they sequence in this way with right angles is because of what's easy to cross-sell. You know, from being if you're a speaker, it's easy to sell your book with, you know, book me for $5,000 and everybody in the audience gets a copy of my book. Or you hand out a book to a meeting planner and say, hey, I'd love to speak at your event. They work together. But when I think that the reason speaking and coaching are so far away from each other is because there's a bit of distance. And hire me as your coach. When you're speaking, you're literally the sage on the stage. And when you're a coach, you're literally the guy by the side. And so they're not as complementary as things that are closer together in their right angles. And maybe that's why they suggest it this way, is because of what naturally progresses between one delivery mode and another.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Caelan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I face some struggle with this, with the right angles, because they make sense. I see why they recommend them this way, but my modes are distributed. You know, I'm most comfortable as a speaker and as a coach, which are just up. There's ways to get them to work together, but they're functionally not as complementary as other pairs and other triads. And so it's forcing me to say, well, okay, I need to develop some training programs. Okay, I need to write a book, because if I be a speaker, those are the modes that are right next to speaker. And so I need to develop those in order to build my ladder from one mode to another.
mm-hmm.
Now, Sonia, you do speaking and you do training. What modes would you say, like if you had to select 3 that you want to base your practice on, which 3 modes, like, and not thinking of the right angles,
Mm-hmm.
but just which 3 would you say are you have the most affinity with?
Speaker, trainer, coach.
Speaker, trainer, coach.
Mm-hmm. I would say that mentoring would be be on the
Yeah,
bottom
Matt,
of
what
my
about you?
list.
Oh, sorry about that. Mentors at the bottom of your list.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it at the bottom of your list?
You know, either I don't understand it, or mentoring. I think the connotation for me has always been not as positive, just because I hadn't had a positive experience with the mentor. Yeah, so I ranked. You know, as I was going through this, I ranked each of these
Oh,
modes.
really?
Yeah, I did. You know, author would be next step, and then facilitator, because I think facilitation and training is very similar for
Yeah, I
me.
agree.
And then speaker, and then coach. So that's kind of, I mean, from the bottom up, that's, I was playing with this to see where, if I could create this right angle, what would it look like?
Yeah, I agree with you that mentor is, it's a challenging one for me to grasp. And so I wonder if it's something that fits better with people who are black belts, who have a lot of demands on their time, and they can give one-on-one attention for a very high price. But to me, I'm not really seeing the difference between a mentor and a coach. You know, they seem so similar to me, but maybe there's something I don't understand here. What about you, Matt? What modes would you say you're the most comfortable with?
I think facilitator, coach, and trainer, probably the 3 I'm most comfortable with. A little bit similar to what you've been talking about, I guess the mentor mode is an interesting one. I kind of see that, you know, fitting within the consulting work that I do, where you come in, you know the answers, and you've walked the path, and you can share the knowledge, as opposed to asking the client, you know, what do you think, which is more of a coaching mode. So it sort of fits in there as well for me. I mean, those are the 4 I'm most comfortable with, I would say. And I know you said 3, but kind of those are the ones that I'm really building my practice around, because I feel like the speaker and the authorship is something that will come later, once you've got more runs on the board. And yeah, just in terms of how I want to build my practice, those are the 4 that I would lead with.
I find it very interesting that you overlap consulting with mentorship. Because I've an implementation and thought leaders business. How do I categorize this? where does services go in this? And Peter Cook said, services are not thought leadership. Services are something else. And while you're getting your practice all off the ground, sure, offer services. Take money where you can get it. But the transition from services into these other delivery modes is the transition.
Mm.
We're losing you a lot, Caelan.
Yeah, we didn't hear that.
No.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Most
of what you just said, I'm sure it was I'm sure it was the absolute gem of this entire call, and we didn't get it.
Oh.
But I think what you were driving at was
the
the services being different to the mentorship, and I agree. But I think that depends on the nature of the services you provide. So, for example, if you were in the business of software development and you're a software developer and you're trying to move into a thought leadership practice, sure, coding does not equate thought leadership necessarily, but if the nature of the services you provide is more advisory, more strategic, I think it can be more of a mentoring type approach, where if you're there to provide the client with some guidance and some direction, that's different to doing the work itself.
That's a good distinction. Who is doing the do? Yeah. And in that instance, I could see that strategy is mentoring. But
Yes.
the implementation, the execution, that's outside of thought.
Correct.
So how do you bring it in? Do you simply stop taking services clients and consulting clients and transition over into thought leadership as a whole? Or is there a way to maintain consulting at the same time as you're running a thought leaders practice?
No, we're losing you again, Caelan.
Yeah.
Dang it. Sorry about that.
Just a suggestion, but maybe dialing in might be a better option here, because maybe the Wi-Fi isn't so great where you are.
Yeah, I'm going to try that.
Hello.
Hello?
Things must be very busy where he is.
I'd say. What time is it in your area?
So I'm in Australia, which is, I think,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of hours behind Caelan. It's 11:30 here in the morning, or 20 to 12.
Okay, on Monday.
Yes, on Monday. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you're about 15 hours roughly ahead.
Sounds about right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hello, Caelan. Are you with us?
Yes. I think I've got this to work. 1 second.
Yay.
My apologies for the technical difficulties.
It's okay.
No worries.
Great. Okay, that's much clearer. Okay, so let's move on to chapter 12, where we talk about the pursuit of mastery. And I really like how they handle mastery, because they say that mastery is a great pursuit, but it's often one achieved at some commercial cost. So you have to decide when you're going to put aside the commercial pursuits of your practice in order to master these 6 delivery modes, which are the backbone of your practice. And so my question is, how can we balance those? How do you know when it's time to promote and sell and deliver, and when it's time to pull back and work on mastery?
So I was challenged with this as well. Can you not do both simultaneously? I mean, as you, for instance, if you are going through a coaching program, part of the program is to coach pro bono as you're gaining the experience and as you're gaining, at that point, I would not call it mastery, but at least you're gaining competency. So after you have, gained your competency, your certificate, you're still experiencing, even though you've had paid clients, you coach, 100 people, and you're going to be much better at coaching the 100th person than you were the very first person who you coached for pay. So I think that it could be pursued simultaneously. And it is because you're getting paid to speak, but as you gain mastery, you're getting paid more to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're saying that that mastery happens naturally in the delivery.
Yes, as you become intentional about your practice. If you go through the practice and then you go through say the self-reflection piece, if your intent is mastery, yes, some people can go through the motions and really I think if you're intentional and you're professional with your pursuits, then over time you do become masterful at the craft, whatever the craft is: speaking, facilitation, coaching. I think that all comes with intentional experience, intentionally pursuing mastery, but it doesn't happen. It happens over time.
Yeah. And I think that, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
For me, the nature of this section of the book is really giving you blueprints for action plans about how to, when you reach a certain stage, what's the next thing you could do, or maybe even should do, to sort of level up to the next, the next tier, if you will, rather than it being, it's absolutely something that you would do as part of developing your practice. I think if you take the coaching element as an example, right, there's five key things you can do there. Identify 20 people that you could coach, select 12 IP snapshots that meet their needs, create a package of coaching sessions and scope the offering, invite the 20 people you identified to meet with you one-on-one, and then invite them to join your coaching program. So I think it's really more or less, that is the execution plan, if you will, for when I'm at this level as a coach. These are the actions I should be taking or could be taking to help develop my practice to the next level, rather than just trying through sheer brute force, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Yeah, I've also found this section of the book really helpful for troubleshooting. I had a training program that I launched, and I was dissatisfied with the launch. And so I came back to this chapter, and I said, okay, well, what are the key actions for training? And what they said was to review a solutions audit for the market and the message, and that you conduct a market survey to find out what are the challenges that people are facing. And then you write up a 300 word report on every component of the audit. I find that people are having this problem and this problem and this problem, and then you collect those together in a white paper, and you bring that back around to the people that you originally interviewed. And then you have a warm lead, because you're delivering the white paper with the results of your conversation and saying, hey, I find that people are facing these problems, so I designed this solution based on what I've learned. And if you face these problems and you want this solution, then here's the training program. And it's a much more holistic way to go about creating and launching a training program, rather than, hey, here's some intellectual property I've packaged together. Do you want to buy it?
Yeah, I saw the steps. I'm just wondering if the timeline, I mean, I think, you know, for some, the timeline might be longer than perhaps, you know, it depends, depending on, you know, a variety of variabilities that are going on, you know, within your practice or personal life or whatever at the same time. I see it as a step by step, but then I think for some, you know, I could see it taking me longer to do particular things or taking particular actions versus others. I think both of you are going through the program, so I'm kind of, I mean, you're immersed in the experience. I haven't had that experience, so I'm coming from it from a complete outsider.
Yeah.
You know, just from reading the book, as you say, the transformation. Yeah, I think it's a very well thought out process. Having not experienced and immersed myself with the actual content, as well as you two have, I find I'm a little. It seems like an oversimplification in my view because I've not experienced it yet.
Yeah. Look, I think that, like all of these resources, they're meant to be a guide. You know, that's why I was sort of careful to say these are the things you could do or maybe should do, rather than must do. I think, you know, for a lot of people, it's easy to get stuck in the mud. And the interesting thing about it is that they don't cast it in terms of how much time, but more so about when you're at a particular earnings level. So, you know, if some things do take longer, maybe it's just there's a longer incubation period for that particular mode. And so it's less about saying, well, if you don't do these things in 2 weeks, you know, then you're not succeeding. It's more, these are the steps you should go through to sort of seed opportunity, and to grow your practice and grow demand when you're at this particular level. And it doesn't, you know, to each person, it's going to take a different amount of time, depending on your market, depending on your skill set, depending on how much you believe in the steps. Like, I think that's an important thing as well, you know, that you've called out. It feels like an oversimplification. So the question, I guess, that I would ask back is, well, if that's too simple, why make it more complex? You know, if you take the simple steps and they don't work, sure, look for more complex answers. But if you haven't taken the simple steps, then what's the harm in doing so, I guess?
Yeah, and I think the question comes back to me is, so what's getting in my way? I'm self-coaching.
Well,
most of the time, what's getting in our way is us, right? And that's what Matt talks a lot about.
Yeah.
So if you had to define what's in your way right now, Sonia, what would you say it is?
My focus, really, going in too many directions at one time. And I'm highly aware of it and have taken steps to become more focused. I spread myself out too thin, trying to go after too many things at once when that doesn't work.
So I think that this is a problem that is common to a lot of thought leaders, because we have 6 delivery modes to choose from, plus consulting if we want to keep it outside of this framework. So how do we focus? How can we, as multi-potentialite people who have so many different delivery modes open to us, how can we rein it in? How have you seen other people successfully do that before?
Make a choice.
And what would that mean?
Focus on only one area at a time.
Ooh, one area at a time. Gosh, the thought of that, it makes me think, but what about all the other cool things I won't be doing?
Shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I think that's the power of the cluster strategy, though, right? That's what it's there to do, is to,
Mm-hmm.
and they talk about this in the curriculum, and certainly at some of the morning teas that I've been to. The word decision has a common etymology
Mm-hmm.
with I forget what the specific words were, but basically it means to
Cutting
kill,
out.
right?
Yeah. Cutting out.
Decidere,
Yeah.
it means to cut off.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so that's the bit that we all wrestle with, I think, and that's, in some ways, that's the power of the cluster strategy, because you're really just prioritizing your clusters. And I think the next webcast is actually the sequencing of clusters that we'll be doing. I think it's next week or maybe this week. In fact, I think it's tomorrow morning. So, if I haven't advertised it enough, getting into the foundation program gives you access to these things. But, just being able to say, all right, well, it's not that I'm never going to do this thing, it's that I'm not going to do it now. And that's still a tough decision, but a less tough decision than feeling like you're absolutely killing something forever. So you really just, you brainstorm your clusters and say, which one of these is the lowest hanging fruit that will help me get momentum? I'm going to focus on that for 90 days. And the odds are that it's 50-50 as to whether it will succeed or fail. And at which point I can pick up that other thing that I thought might be successful. So you don't lose the value of that thinking, as opposed to having to commit yourself for a whole year or longer to a single cluster and just get through it with grit. So yeah, I think that's an important part of the program.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the variety really helps us to keep us from getting bored. That, well, if this fails, then go ahead and do something else. Keep trying.
Yeah, but even the effort that's put into that one thing, I see that as being valued, because you learned something that could inform the next cluster. Absolutely. So I don't see that, but it's just so tempting, and I know that I do tend to get I tend to see things that, or put dots together that I hadn't thought of before, and that's, I need to pursue that, and then oh no, but this dot connects too, and that's really interesting, that's fascinating, let's go here. So that's a constant challenge for me.
Well, one of the things that I appreciate so much about this methodology is that you can take someone who has a wide range of different interests and delivers them to multiple audiences in multiple methods. And you can still bring everything together under one big word. And what they say is that, your big word is the umbrella under which all the different things that you do resides. So I'd like to ask both of you, what's your big word?
Mine's connection. I wrote that in the book.
Connection.
Yeah, I wrote it
Nice.
in the book. Yeah, a while back when I read this over a year ago, and it's still the same word. So I'm very happy.
It's
but
a good
I'm
one
stuck.
for you.
Yes.
I think one of the things that gets raised I think it's the curriculum, is having a big word means having a big word for a period of time, and it's possible to have multiple layers in that. And so on a recent webcast, Cole talked about there's a word for the year, and each quarter has its own word as well. For me, I think my big word is forming up to be capability. And then
Nice.
the first quarter is really belief, which I actually think, and I've said this to someone else, I think there's in the belt strategy, I think there is actually if you want to call it a clear belt underneath the white belt, which is, I believe, that the focus is, rather than being decision, is belief. Because if you don't believe this methodology works, then you're not going to engage with the decision. And so I don't know whether internally they talk about that and they just don't share it externally, but I think it's an important recognition to say, there's an element of this that, certainly when I came to the program, I was very skeptical. I rang a few people who were involved in the program that I know. I asked them their opinion and what results it had generated for them. I needed to develop the belief that I wasn't, following you know, an oasis or chasing an oasis. And so for me, that was a critical step. Before decision was getting that belief. And I think in the context of this year, it's really about the belief that I can do this. You know, having made the decision, it almost comes back into the fore, which is, you know, belief in myself, belief in the opportunity. You know, there's so many elements of it.
That's good. I really like that. Yeah. Yeah. And I like having a guiding word for your practice and then a word for the quarter, because it kind of gives you the shorter term direction for where you're going and what you're doing.
Yeah. I like the way Cole's, and I haven't come up with my version of this yet, but Cole's ones tend to be, and I think he posted something on Central about this, you know, tend to be themed around interesting or seemingly unconnected ideas. So he said he talked about one guy whose year for the word was pirate, and so his whole persona changed for the year, and he even went to the extent of growing a long beard and you know, wearing pirate clothing and things, just in terms of his practice.
That's amazing.
But each stage of it had some, you know, something that was thematically connected. And Cole's done something similar. He posted, I think it might have been on Facebook, that he posted about how he's a drummer, and for him it's rhythm this year. And so he talks about all the different aspects of rhythm that sort of come in. So he's using sort of the metaphor of drumming as a way to sort of form his ideas, which I think is really powerful.
What I like so much about that is that it's not just clarifying in terms of his direction and his thinking, but it's also personal.
Yes.
It really brings his personality into it, both from his own subjective experience, but also for people who are looking at him from the outside.
Yes.
You know, we know Cole more because he shared that story. So I really like that it's a good word.
This is a bit improvisational as well.
Yeah.
Because in improv, we don't take things literally. You know, if the audience gives you a word to inspire you to start the scene, you don't necessarily take that particular word and go with it. You think of, well, what does that word make me think of? And you take the scene in a million different directions, or the scene can go, or various scenes in that long form can go in various different directions. So I love that part of this it's a bit like improv.
Yeah, that's really insightful, because the big word isn't meant to corral your work into one predefined space. It should be used to bounce into new areas that are unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens if we as thought leaders, if we suddenly gain an interest in something that isn't properly covered by our big word? Do we just decide not to do it? Or do we find some way to make it work within the big word we've been using?
My path would be to find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. And I think that's what makes it powerful. And Lynn talked about this in one of her videos as well, where she was saying, you know, she was taking her, or asking people to write down their hobbies and then their topics, and then trying to make a connection between those things, because our brains are really good at making connections between things. But spontaneous inspiration is quite hard. So, you know, having these two seemingly disparate lists and trying to mash them together gives you a way of saying, well, how is, you know, my practice like, you know, like winemaking, or like, you know, running, or whatever your interests are, and that gives you a way to do a metaphor, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, we have had another fantastic conversation today. I really appreciate you bringing so many great insights, and I apologize for my technical difficulties. I'll be at home next week, so it'll be nice and normal. But next week is going to be really fun, because we're looking at the different belt levels in Section 5. And so Section 5, the steps to success, is going to be back here at the same time next week, and I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation with you then.
Indeed.
Likewise.
Thanks, Caelan. Thanks,
All
Sonny.
right.
Lovely
Yes.
to see you
Thanks
both.
so much.
Yes. Thanks,
Have fun
Matt
out there.
and Caelan.
Have a great week.
All right. You too.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.